A K-9 unit was deep in training when Sergeant Noah Briggs, a 51-year-old field veteran, turned his back for a moment, and his 5 German shepherds vanished into the snow-covered wilderness. He called, whistled, even retraced his steps. Nothing. But those dogs weren't lost. They were headed toward something that would haunt everyone who saw it. What they discovered in those frozen woods wasn't an animal. It was a man, chained, bloodied, and barely breathing. And what the dogs did next will shake you to your core. If stories of loyalty, survival, and silent heroes move you, don't forget to subscribe and follow our channel for more gripping tales like this one. Noah's breath caught in his throat as he scanned the empty trail. The silence was thick. No wind, no birds, no paw prints. Just endless snow and the faint scent of pine. Then, through the stillness, came a low bark. Not frantic, but sharp, intentional. He turned and saw movement just beyond the ridge. His lead dog, Ranger, stood still as a statue, ears forward, eyes locked on something in the trees. And then Noah saw it, barely, just a shape slumped against a pine. As he ran forward, his boots breaking the frozen crust, the scene unfolded in heartbreaking detail. It was a man, mid-40s, bleeding from the head, face pale and frost-bitten. Heavy chains wrapped around his torso and wrists, binding him upright to the tree like a crucified warning. His ranger uniform was shredded, soaked in a mixture of blood and melting snow. And around him, the K-9s. They weren't barking or panicking, they were working. Ranger sniffed the chains, then backed up and barked 3 times, each one deliberate, a signal. 2 other dogs fanned out, checking the perimeter, while one began digging at the snow beneath the man's feet. Noah's training kicked in, but his heart was 2 steps ahead. This wasn't coincidence. These dogs had found him. Not by mistake, not by accident. They had followed something stronger than scent, something like purpose. And deep inside, Noah knew. This was no ordinary rescue. It was just the beginning. The man's lips barely moved, but Noah leaned closer and caught a whisper. "Don't leave me." His voice cracked, more air than sound, yet it hit like thunder. Noah radioed for emergency evac while his hands trembled. Not from the cold, but from fury. Who could do this? Who would leave a fellow ranger chained like an animal in the middle of nowhere? As medics arrived and the man, identified as Ranger Elias Ward, was airlifted out, Noah stayed behind with Ranger and the K-9 team. Something didn't sit right. Elias wasn't just attacked. He was placed, deliberately, in a remote sector with no patrols, no cameras, no reason for anyone to stumble upon him, unless guided. That night, Elias was stable enough to talk. In short bursts between pain meds and shallow breaths, he shared the truth. He'd refused to sign off on illegal logging access near the protected wildlife corridor. The threats started small, phone calls, warnings. Then someone tampered with his brakes. Finally, they made their move. And if it hadn't been for the dogs, I'd be bones under that pine by spring, Elias whispered. But the most unexpected moment came hours later, when Ranger, the lead K-9, slipped into the hospital room, uninvited, unbothered. He walked to Elias, sat down, and placed his head gently on the man's chest. No command, no training, just connection. It wasn't just instinct, it was recognition. The following morning, just as the snow began to thaw beneath the early light, a new layer of dread settled over the ranger station. Sheriff Alan Merrick, broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and respected for nearly 2 decades, arrived to check in. His voice was steady, his handshake firm, but something in his eyes didn't sit right with Noah. Too calm, too rehearsed. Later that day, while reviewing trail cam data and incident reports, Noah found something odd. Documents showing that Elias had approved access for a contractor named Brent Malden just 3 weeks before the attack. The signature? It matched. But Elias swore he'd never signed it. Noah brought it to the sheriff, and that's when everything changed. Merrick didn't flinch. He simply sighed, as if he were tired of pretending. Then he said, "You were never supposed to find him." Noah's blood ran cold. "You knew," he whispered. "You left him out there." The sheriff's jaw tensed. "You don't understand how deep this goes," he said. "I didn't chain him, but I knew who would. I tried to keep it clean, quiet, but that damn dog." He trailed off, eyes darting toward Ranger, who stood behind Noah, ears pinned back, body low. Then came a sound that froze them all, a growl, deep and rising. Not just warning, judgment. Noah didn't say a word. He reached for his radio. But before he could call it in, Sheriff Merrick was already reaching for his sidearm. The standoff lasted only seconds. But to Noah, it felt like an eternity. Sheriff Merrick's fingers brushed the grip of his pistol, but Ranger was already moving. With a burst of speed only a seasoned canine could muster, he lunged, jaws clamping down on Merrick's forearm just as the weapon cleared the holster. The sheriff roared in pain and hit the ground hard, his sidearm skidding across the wooden floor. Noah didn't hesitate. He kicked the pistol away and pinned Merrick beneath his knee. The betrayal, the lies, the calculated cruelty. It all boiled to the surface. This wasn't just about Elias anymore. It was about how deep the rot had spread, and how long it had been allowed to grow under a badge people trusted. When backup arrived, Merrick said nothing. He was escorted out in silence, his eyes never leaving Ranger, who stood between Noah and the door like a living line in the sand. But the nightmare wasn't over. Hours later, during a routine perimeter check, Deputy Marla Reyes found fresh tire tracks leading into the woods behind Sector 7, a place marked as inactive. The tracks were recent, and more disturbingly, the snow near one of the old patrol cabins was melted, like someone had burned something there. Evidence or witnesses? That night, Elias's heart monitor spiked twice. He didn't wake, but his breathing changed, faster, shallow, panicked, as if some part of him knew they hadn't caught them all. Ranger refused to rest. He paced by the window, ears twitching, growl low in his throat. Noah watched the dog, his gut heavy with something he couldn't name. They weren't just cleaning up the mess, they were erasing it. By sunrise, Sector 7 was crawling with investigators. Charred debris was pulled from the fire pit behind the patrol cabin, burned papers, melted camera parts, and something worse, scraps of an official ranger uniform. It wasn't just about hiding what they did to Elias. Someone else had been silenced. Noah stood at the edge of the scene, fists clenched inside his gloves. The forest no longer felt familiar. It felt haunted. Back at the station, Ranger was being checked for a limp he'd developed after the takedown of Merrick, but the vet's report was clear. No injury, just fatigue. Still, the dog refused to lie down. He waited by the exit, tail low, nose to the wind. Later that day, State Command offered Noah an option: early retirement with full honors, or reassignment to a desk in Helena. But instead of answering, Noah turned to Ranger. "You want out?" he asked softly. Ranger didn't flinch. He stepped forward, nudged Noah's hand, then looked toward the forest, where the shadows still moved and the silence spoke volumes. By nightfall, a decision was made. A new division would be formed. Echo K9 Tactical, with Noah and Ranger as its first unit. They wouldn't just patrol anymore. They would hunt what others were too afraid to see. The scars they carried weren't badges of trauma. They were proof they'd survived and weren't finished fighting. Spring crept over the Rockies like a slow exhale, melting snow, exposing what winter tried to bury. But not everything thawed clean. Reports kept coming in. Unauthorized motion near decommissioned cabins, encrypted radio signals bleeding into ranger channels, and wildlife cameras going dark one by one. It wasn't over. If anything, it was only getting smarter. Noah, now head of Echo K9 Tactical, kept his team lean and trusted. Ranger was back in the field, slower than before but sharper than ever. Every step he took was deliberate, every breath calculated. His scar, once a mark of old wounds, had become a symbol around the station, a reminder that loyalty doesn't retire. Then, one evening just before dusk, Ranger froze mid-patrol near the old West Ridge Trail. His ears stiffened, his body locked, and he let out a low, rumbling growl. Noah followed his gaze and saw it. Just for a moment. A figure standing half-shrouded behind the trees, not fleeing, just watching. By the time they reached the spot, it was empty, but on the ground lay a single item, a rusted ranger badge half buried in pine needles. Noah picked it up slowly. It wasn't from their current registry. It was from 10 years ago. And just like that, it was clear. The network wasn't just made of shadows. It had roots. Old ones. Ones that stretched further back than anyone had dared to imagine. This story reminds us that true loyalty and purpose often emerge in life's darkest moments. Whether it's a loyal canine defying danger or a man standing firm against betrayal, courage isn't about being fearless. It's about refusing to turn away when it matters most. As we age, we learn that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and loyal, like Ranger waiting by the door. The lesson is simple but powerful. Never underestimate the bonds we build, and never stop fighting for what's right, even when the world tells you to walk away. Integrity, like loyalty, endures beyond the storm.